My name is Silburn Clarke, and I'm going to be your pilot navigator through the topic of parcel ownership mapping and irrigation water demand surveys. If there's any aspect of it that you have a question on, we're going to have a 10-minute session, I think, Uchi, for answers at the end. So our flight plan is to go through project background and context, parcel ownership mapping, irrigation water demand census. Then we're gonna take a pause for a major crisis in our climate that occurred in July 3rd or 4th. And then we'll have some post-burial commentary. Burial was an ill wind that blew some good. So the project that we're gonna reference in this discussion is the Pedro Irrigation Water Project. Pedro is located in South St Elizabethans, and at its root, it's a climate crisis emergency. There has been an acceleration in the decline of agricultural output from that area, one caused by the ever declining, the ever heating up of our environment caused by climate challenges. But the second cause of the decline has been a dynamic disinvestment out of agriculture. Because if you're in agriculture, you're not making any progress, sell the land. So people have been divesting out of agriculture and selling their historical lands to wealthier Jamaicans who return from overseas, and also to persons who are interested in resort development. The project is a national strategic initiative of the government, and it is seeking to save what has been the bread basket for the country. Despite their climate challenges over the years, they are known as the bread basket, mainly for short-term crops. They have developed over several decades an innovative practice called dry weather farming, where they use the dew from the atmosphere to moisture the soil and create great output. The records show, however, that only 8% of the arable lands in the area is serviced by irrigation water. The executing agency for the project is the National Irrigation Commission, the NIC, and they are strategically co-partnered on that project by the RADA, the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, the NLA, importantly, the valuation branch, specifically, and the St. Elizabeth Municipal Corporation. The gross area for the project is 55 square miles, and the objective mapping component, of the mapping component is to deliver quality data for the planning and engineering and design work that the NIC has to do to implement this project, this major strategic initiative. The project is valued at $200 million when it is fully implemented. And so it's a it's the largest agricultural infrastructure project of the government. The contract for the mapping component was let to Llewellyn Allen and Associates. Some of us in the room knows Llewellyn Allen. And Llewellyn, in turn, subcontracted the irrigation water component to myself. Ground is supposed to be broken this year, in this financial year, which ends March 31st next year, on the project. So data integrity is key for the project. What are some of the elements that the government is seeking timely and accurate information on? First of all, land tenure status. Who owns what? Who is registered owner? Who is occupier legally and illegally? The precise location and size of farm lots. The attitude by the farmers in the area to the project. So this project has been going on, I hear, or the ideas of this project, the concept of the plan, to use another term, has been around from before independence. And so there's a high level of skepticism when people come around and say, oh, we're seeking to understand if you're interested in this water project. In Jamaica parlance, they run you. And finally, the NIC is seeking information on the type of farming activities, both current and planned by those who are interested in the project in terms of crop types, crop categories, and livestock. The mapping component, which was awarded to Llewellyn, covers parcel ownership mapping based on the NLA's land valuation manuals and manuals on the procedure to execute parcel ownership mapping. The irrigation water demand census, which we'll get into a little bit later. And it also covers land acquisition of the right-of-way where the main trunk line for the irrigation main pipeline would run, and also site surveys for reservoir sites, booster sites, etc. So graphically, I'm not sure if you can see, and we can't dim the lights because I hear it. You have to get on a ladder and scroll the bulbs. But you get the red line, oops. The red line indicates the track of the main trunk line. It's coming from the Black River, which is our major river in the north, and tapping on an intake at Cashew in Lacovia, comes south to service the project area. Let me talk a little bit about precipitation. I don't have a pointer, but if you can see this little area here, which has the faintest colors in the index of precipitation, those are dry area, the driest parts of Jamaica. And that's exactly where Pedro lands. And if we blow that up, all of that light here is the driest index for rainwater. Now, the government is planning a stage rollout where the lowest areas or the driest areas will be where the first infrastructure is laid down. Then the mid area and then the higher elevations will be the third level of the rollout. Now, let me talk about parcel ownership mapping. The project sits in 267 land val enclosures. Now, a land val enclosure is an administrative block by the land valuation department for taxation purposes, land tax purposes. And when we explode those 267 land val enclosures, we are working with 15,500 individual tax parcels. So that's the scope of the project. The Rural Agricultural Development Authority, from another perspective, tells us that the area has 6,300 registered farmers, farmers who have registered with the Ministry of Agriculture. And they are dispersed 1,630 in Mountainside, which is the division to the west. Pedro Plains has roughly 2,200. South Field, 2,400. And to the easternmost side, we have Junction, which has around 700. Some of these areas in Junction were latterly added to the project as the project evolved. So they weren't in the original scope of the project. Now, what are some of the design considerations for kick-starting the project by the NLA and the NIC? So although we have 15,500 parcels, approximately for the purpose of the planning and design, only approximately 7,900 was assumed to be associated with farming. The NLA and the NIC then projected that roughly every parcel is fragmented roughly 2.5 times. And so based on that projection, which we found out later might not be very accurate, the ownership mapping target that was set for the project was 19,900 parcels to be surveyed. The NLA also told us that roughly 60% of the parcels in the project area were registered. Where Unregistered. My bad. I was wondering how it reached so high. We're unregistered. So there's a mountain of registration to overcome. And finally, there's a high incidence of name out of datedness with the names that are on the registers. Now, what are some of the data integrity issues? This is depicting a titled parcel that has been surveyed. What is in yellow is what is on the record. What is in blue or green is what is georeferenced by surveyors on a title plan. So that's an example of one of the challenges that the project has to correct. So at the end of the day, the project is seeking to bring everything into a relatively good order of accuracy. Another depiction. Now, what is in red is the NLA's database. The black outline, as a matter of fact, the transparency in itself is an extract from the titles office of a surveyed parcel. Now, there's a little history behind here because this was led to a valuer to be valued. And the valuer called back and said, look like the boundary gone through the property, through the buildings on the property. You know. I said, what? They said, yeah, we're going to go on the NLA Eland site and check the parcel, the people who build the hotel, they built it through the boundaries. There's an encroachment. I said, no, guys, that's not an encroachment. So I took it on myself to do the fit, to send to them to say, no. What is in error is the NLA's database. Separate and apart from the geography of it, the surveying of it, the parcel ownership mapping is required to populate inspection sheets from the NLA. And these inspection sheets, which serve as an attribute list for the project, for the parcel ownership mapping project, includes the typical suspects, valuation number, person in possession, title reference. But for surveyors, that took us a little bit out of our normal circle and asked for description of property soil, land use, services, physical characteristics. So we had to extend ourselves a little bit to get into that part of it. What are some of the geospatial technology? I don't know, Uchi is going to talk more about geospatial technology. We had a very good presentation by Melanie Harris from Trinidad yesterday. So that was a prerequisite to come into this session. I hope everybody attended that session. From the ownership mapping project, you'd have heard Melanie speak about dashboards in the valuation division down in Trinidad. So dashboards were part of this project. Web maps and RGS Online were part of this project. And on the parcel ownership field data collection, we had DJI drones for orthophoto mapping deployed. We had ArcGIS Pro, drone to map software, Pix4D software, and these are software that do orthophoto mapping, ArcGIS Field Map, and AutoCAD. The surveying techniques were many and varied, starting from rigorous ground control, pre-marked ground control for the flights, for the orthophoto maps. We use aerial photogrammetry, digital aerial photogrammetry to prepare orthophoto maps, which form the basis of the image layer for the project. I mentioned parcel boundary surveys. These would have been done using technologies from Trimble and from Esri to mark and delineate and populate in the digital sphere the parcel boundaries for the maps. And finally, we touched on the attribute files just now. Now, by task, the mapping activity was thus: first, the establishment of the ground control points, then blocking and nesting of parcels into map sheets. Well, that was the initial idea. Acquisition and processing of the drone imagery, mapping of the parcel boundaries, compilation of the ownership attribute data, compilation of the ownership map sheets, public display of these compiled map sheets to validate and test the data, amendments of the ownership map and attribute data based on the feedback from the public, and finally, delivery of the completed map. How does that stack up with the actual targets and what was achieved to date? So the target for ground control was 390, that was done. For the blocking and listing of parcels, that has not been done because the project personnel decided in consultation with the NLA, that the nesting of parcels should be done by the land val enclosures, not by arbitrary map sheets. In terms of aerial imagery, 27,000 acres were planned and delivered. Mapping of the parcel boundaries, 17,000, which is a revised target, was planned and 14,050 delivered. Compilation of the parcel map sheets, I don't have data on that, but certainly in terms of the public display, only the compilation of the attribute sheets, not the map sheets. The attribute sheets, 43 of 400 has been done. Compilation of the parcel ownership map sheets, I don't have data on that. But the public display, 10 of the 400 have been displayed so far. And finally, no amendments have been done on sheets as yet, and the delivery of the completed parcels so far is 14,050. Broken down as shown. 3,048 from CAD maps from the NLA itself, 1,899 from other surveys from the NLA, 3,390 from field work by the personnel engaged on the project. From titles and survey plans, 925, and digitized from the orthophotos, 4,087, to give a total of 14,050. So far, 14,000 have been delineated. In terms of their dispersion, geographically, they are quite spotty, actually. And there are some areas that are dark, which are exclusion areas by the NIC because they do have some level of irrigation, water supply in those areas. At the completion, it won't be a smooth, homogeneous spread. Let me turn now to the farmers' irrigation water demand census, which is really what I was in charge of. The work breakdown for that activity commenced with a sign-off by the Ministry of Agriculture, Fishery and Mining, and also by the NIC on the questionnaire instrument to be deployed. It was an 85-item questionnaire, and that was done in July last year. We then decided to brand our activities in the field because we're going to be engaging with the community. We brand our outward-facing activity as Pedro Water, and we set up hotlines for Pedro Water. We then engage in a number of radio, TV, town crier, door-to-door visitations, town hall meetings, collection centers where we bring people in. And those type of community activities, public awareness activities, took place between August and July this year. And it started slowly because of the skepticism, but then it built. When persons see other persons, your neighbor signing up, then you are motivated to get involved. The DCO training, DCO is the data collection officer, the census officers training. We trained probably around 100 persons, of which we ended up deploying around 39, 40. In terms of field data collection, our initial foray in the field was from August to December last year, and Philip, who just came in, is one of our DCOs. Big up, Philip. And that involved a learning process. Let me put it that way. Learning from the community, learning from everything. We then switched to a contact call center modality because we're able to harvest from the government the RADA registered farmers data. And we then set up a call center in town to call into the community. And that was very, very, very successful. We then went back in the field in May of this year and did a door-to-door, knock on every district, knock on every door in the district, every village, and did a sweep systematically from the western part of the project right back to the eastern part of the project. And that was also highly successful. And throughout, we would have had continuous quality control and quality awareness. So the total census period, effective census period, was from August last year to July this year when burial struck. The 85-item questionnaire I mentioned before, in summary, comprises 7 segments. The first segment had to do with getting the interviewee or the respondents informed consent before we proceed. And in that segment, we also sought to get their level of interest. And some, if they're not interested, to find out why they're not interested. So that first segment was key to going on to the next level. We then drilled down on the respondent, whether they are interested or not interested, more about them, their name, their TRN. To the persons who are not Jamaica, TRN is a tax ID number, personalized tax ID number. Their telephone number, sex, age, addresses, and so on and so forth. We try to do it in a non-intrusive way, where the benefit of participating with a trusted agency outweighed any resistance to share that information. The next segment covered the farm property details. Is it registered, volume on folio, the size of the farm, what is the farm address, what is the tenure status, etc. We then moved into the agricultural segment of the survey, where we ask about crops, we ask about water usage and water purchase, we ask about the challenges that they were facing, any of their recommendations. We did that in this segment 4, for current practices, and in segment 5 for when the water would come under the project. So we also asked them to project what they would be doing in the future. We then ask a question, a whole bunch of questions in the 6th segment about their social networks. Are they part of farming organizations, benevolent societies, RADA itself, and so on and so forth? Do they have any referrals, any fellow farmer that they want to have involved? And the last segment was where we would collect information on geolocation, and where we would also note from the interviewer any particular notes that the interviewer would pick up from the narratives, from the engagement, the discussions. Examples of our community engagement flyers for community buy-in and community sensitization. To the left is what a town hall meeting flyer would look like, mounted by ourselves, by Llewellyn Allen, by NIC, by the NLA. Hyacinth was a frequent person on the road with us. Now, what is the technology stack that we use for the irrigation water census? At the management level, again, we'll have used all of those things mentioned by Melanie yesterday. But in addition, we also engage with SurveyMonkey and with Starlink, because some of the areas are remote. Telecommunication connectivity was difficult at times, so we had to take Starlink on board. The data collection using the field mobile modality would have involved Survey 123 from Esri, and it would also involve SurveyMonkey with Survey 123 in tow for geopointing. In the call center ops, operations, which was only in Kingston, we were using SurveyMonkey, and then we would send the GeoPoint app, Survey 123 GeoPoint app, out to the farmers for them to self-tag using Survey 123, their location. In terms of community outreach, as I mentioned before, we had a hotline established, and we also established WhatsApp groups for all of the 4 agricultural extension areas, and had persons participating back and forth. This is an example of what the dashboard looks like. A section of our pointer, but the section here speaks to the DCOs and the DCOs performance. Here speaks to the water usage answers that would have gotten from the farmers. Source of water, demographics in terms of male, female breakdown, and also something on land tenure status. The dashboard is flexible. You can morph the dashboard to anything that you want. An example of the web apps that we use for managing the field operation. So you'll see names here. And those are people who were the ground supervisors. Daniel, Everard, Lionel, and who's that 4th person? Philip. So they would have been assigned particular grids to working on a daily basis, and as they complete the grid, we shift them to other grids. And the web app also facilitated their navigation to their proper grid and their proper location. Survey Monkey we mentioned before, both the in-house and the supplemental usage with Survey 123. So what is the final report from the Pedro Water Project? 5,479 visits, of which 4,800 roughly responded positively, 680 did not wish to participate for whatever reason, and 315 we counted as reject records. Okay, then came July 30th, July 3rd. 4 of our members, including Philip, were ensconced in Billy's Bay to watch this hurricane. They had never seen a hurricane in the day, they said. They only wake up in the morning and hear that hurricane pass. They wanted to experience a hurricane. It was not a nice experience. And it is a marker of the changing climate dynamics, because it was the earliest ever on record Atlantic storm. And the projection was for this season, entire season, to be very, very active. Touch wood, I have any wood up here. It is not as active as they predicted, as yet. But burial was bad. But it does a ill wind, as I said, that blow some good. We ourselves, Spatial, deployed our resources into the field the following week to render assistance. Because spending so much time in the field, you would have developed, closeness with the community. They were your clients. And so when it happened, they'll be calling on the hotline, requesting tarpaulin, requesting water, requesting food, etc., etc. So we deployed the following week and went down. And you see Philip there in the picture with the water. And we plan to continue with our deployment. We reached out to our partners overseas. We got responses from the Moses West Foundation and from Thirsty Lands, this is Moses West. He is an innovator in what is known as atmospheric water generation business. They responded immediately with 800 portable hand filters, 150 gallons capacity, to help to treat with contaminated or brackish water. It's a sort of bicycle pump fixture that you see there. And it will be able to take out various levels of contaminants, all listed here, from bacteria, cysts, what have you. And that was sent to the Office of Disaster Preparedness for deployment across the 4 parishes, not just Pedro. The 4 affected parishes by burial, which would be Clarendon, Manchester, St Elizabeth, and Westmoreland. Our level 2 response was, how could we build some water resilience? So it started out by saying, how could we get water in the area until the recovery is complete? But it morphed into, how could we build water resilience? And there's a technology called AWG, or atmospheric water generation, which Moses West is one of the pioneers of. And that black unit in the middle is what a unit looks like. That can extract 5,000 gallons of water per day from the atmosphere. And initially, in the case of hurricanes, in 2017, Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico. Initially, they would go down and leave these units for 3 months, 6 months, and then pull it out. But the discussion, as I said, morphed into, what if we allow it to stay longer? That then led to another discussion, which was a burial was a ill wind that blew good, where to fund the operation, they identified a whole bunch of ESG, you guys, well, so I'll break down acronym. Environmental, social, governance mandated entities in the metropole, Canada, United States principally, who wanted, and Terry did an excellent presentation on carbon emission and counting yesterday, who wanted to be able to offset their negative carbon by trading it for positive carbons in South St Elizabeth. And so that trade, that exchange, ended up being offered to St. Elizabeth as a way to fund the generator without the government dipping in its pocket to finance it. Which then takes me to my final slide, Ochi. And it's a question for the practice. What is the state of readiness in the Caribbean? And by readiness, I'm not just talking about RICS guidelines and mandates, but in terms of legislation, in terms of methods, models to do calculations, certification, standards, training, etc., for the assessment and valuation of carbon offsets in the Caribbean. I throw that out. So I know you guys are going to ask us questions, but I throw that out to see if I can get some answers to that as well. And with that, I thank you, and I look forward to engaging in the Q&A. Thank you very much.